The disturbing truth about prison meals. The food tray slid through the slot with a loud metal scrape. On it sat a scoop of gray mush that looked more like wet cement than anything edible. The smell alone made grown men gag. One inmate whispered, "This ain't food, it's poison." And within minutes, his words felt like prophecy. 3 prisoners hunched over their trays began clutching their stomachs, their faces twisting in pain. Guards banged on the bars, yelling for them to get up, but the men collapsed to the cold concrete floor, groaning in agony. The entire block went silent, everyone staring at the trays in front of them, wondering if their next bite could be their last. But here's the disturbing truth. This wasn't an accident. And the most shocking part? What inmates were eating wasn't far off from what was being served every single day. So how did prison food get this bad? Who's responsible for feeding thousands of people meals that can barely be called food? And is it possible that the system itself benefits from keeping meals this way? To understand that, we need to step back to the beginning. It starts with a deal. Big contracts handed out to private food vendors. On paper, these companies promised nutritious and cost-effective meals for inmates. In reality, the cost-cutting was brutal. Instead of fresh produce or real meat, inmates were fed mystery meat, powdered eggs, and beans so old they had to be boiled for hours just to soften. What should have been food became a weapon, cheap, tasteless, and sometimes even dangerous. At first, most prisoners tried to ignore it. They'd trade with each other, scrape together small store bags from commissary, or swallow the food quickly without looking too closely. Some even joked about it, calling the meatloaf roadkill surprise and the soup dirty water. But the jokes didn't last long. Whispers spread through the cell blocks about illnesses tied to the meals. Stomachs cramped, rashes appeared, and one night an entire tier had diarrhea so bad the smell lingered for days. Prisoners knew the truth. The food wasn't just bad, it was breaking them down. The real breaking point came when a new batch of chili was served. Within hours, chaos erupted. Inmates shouted for medical help, banging on their cell doors, while guards scrambled to figure out what was happening. Rumors swirled fast. Some said it was spoiled meat. Others whispered about rats getting into the food storage. Whatever it wasn't just another bad meal. It was a full-blown crisis. And as the smell of rotten spices filled the air, one question hung heavy in the cell block. Was this just negligence, or something much darker? The sound of coughing echoed down the tier. Some inmates pressed wet towels to their faces, trying to block the stench of spoiled chili that now clung to the air like smoke. Others kicked at their doors, begging for water, for medicine, anything. Guards finally rushed in, but instead of help, they barked orders, tossing bleach water across the floor as if cleaning up the mess would erase the problem. One prisoner, known as Red, leaned against the wall, sweat dripping from his forehead. He shouted hoarsely, "We're not animals! You're feeding us trash!" His voice carried down the block, sparking a wave of angry voices. The prison was on edge and everyone knew it. The next morning, trays arrived late. This time, it was 2 slices of stale bread and a pale, rubbery piece of what was supposed to be chicken. Prisoners stared at it in disbelief. Some refused to touch it. Others traded it away, desperate to avoid another night of stomach cramps. But hunger always wins in prison. Men who swore they wouldn't eat still broke off chunks of bread, chewing slowly, swallowing with disgust. That's when a different kind of game began. A small group of inmates started investigating the kitchen. They asked workers, other prisoners assigned to food duty, what was really happening back there. The answers were worse than expected. Expired cans stacked to the ceiling. Meat labeled, "Not for human consumption." Buckets of beans crawling with bugs. And the cooks? They had no choice but to stir it all together and send it out. The discovery fueled rumors that went beyond negligence. Some believed the food company was pocketing millions, buying the cheapest scraps possible. Others whispered something darker, that prison officials didn't care if inmates got sick, because fewer mouths to feed meant more money saved. The tension built slowly, like steam in a locked pot. Meals became smaller, sicker. Even water tasted like metal, leaving a bitter aftertaste. The guards brushed off complaints, but inside the cells, fury was boiling. Then, it happened. During dinner call, an inmate snapped. He hurled his tray across the chow hall, the rotten stew splattering across the floor. Others followed, flipping tables, throwing bread, shouting at the guards. The entire hall erupted into chaos. Guards rushed in with batons, prisoners ducked, fists flew, and the sound of metal against flesh echoed off the walls. It wasn't just a food fight. It was a riot, sparked by the disturbing truth that the meals weren't just disgusting. They were destroying lives. The chow hall floor was slick with stew, breadcrumbs, and blood. Sirens wailed as guards shoved inmates against walls, zip-tying wrists and dragging them out one by one. The riot was crushed in less than an hour, but its echo lingered in the air like gunpowder after an explosion. The warden's response was immediate and brutal. Lockdown. Every inmate confined to their cells 23 hours a day. No yard, no library, no visits. And worst of all, the food got even worse. Instead of trays, the prison rolled out something inmates called the loaf. Officially, it was nutritional loaf, a block of baked mush made from leftover beans, vegetables, and whatever scraps were around. Imagine meat, bread, and oatmeal blended into one, then hardened into a brick. That was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day after day. At first, prisoners tried to eat it. They broke it apart, dipped it in water, even tried heating it on cell lights to soften the taste. But soon, men started vomiting. Some flushed it down the toilet. Others hid it under their mattresses, letting the stink fill their cells rather than take another bite. The guards mocked them, saying, "Don't like it? Don't cause trouble." But everyone knew the truth. The loaf wasn't just punishment. It was torture, served 3 times a day. Whispers spread faster than ever. Inmates talked through vents, passing notes on toilet paper, telling each other what they'd heard. A kitchen worker claimed the loaf wasn't properly baked, leading to mold growing inside. Another said rats had been found in the food storage again. Every rumor added fuel to the fire, and the fear inside the prison turned into rage. Then one night, it all boiled over. An inmate named Darnell collapsed in his cell after days of refusing to eat the loaf. His cellmates screamed for help, banging on the bars until his hands bled. When the guards finally opened the door, it was too late. Darnell wasn't moving. The tier erupted in chaos. Inmates screamed, kicking doors, demanding answers. The guards tried to shut them down with threats, but the energy in the prison had shifted. This wasn't just about hunger anymore. It was about survival. And as word of Darnell's death spread through the blocks, everyone knew something bigger was coming, something no lockdown could control. The news of Darnell's death traveled faster than the guards could silence it. Inmates tapped on pipes, whispered through vents, and shouted from tier to tier, "They killed him with that loaf!" By morning, the whole prison knew. The warden tried to cover it up. Official reports claimed natural causes, but nobody believed that. Darnell had been healthy just a week earlier. Now, his death was the spark on dry grass. At first, the resistance was quiet. Inmates began refusing their trays, sliding them back untouched. The loaf sat in corners of cells, hardening into bricks. Some prisoners smashed it against walls, carving words into it like protest signs. "Not food," or "We are human." But hunger is its own kind of torture. After 3 days, stomachs growled, hands trembled, and men were forced to make impossible choices. Some traded cigarettes for commissary noodles. Others scraped peanut butter from old jars hidden in their bunks. But not everyone had that luxury. Many had nothing. That's when desperation turned to rebellion. In the chow hall, a group of inmates shoved their trays back at the guards, chanting, "We want real food! We want real food!" Their voices grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls. More prisoners joined in, pounding tables in rhythm. The guards barked orders, but the chants swallowed their voices. Suddenly, a tray flew across the room. Then another. Then dozens. Food, bread, and trays filled the air like missiles. Guards rushed in with shields, but the hall was already a battlefield. Inmates climbed onto tables, fists raised, voices united. The guards fought back with tear gas. Smoke filled the hall, choking the inmates, making their eyes burn. Men coughed, spat, and stumbled, but they kept chanting through the haze. The sound was haunting. Hundreds of voices demanding something as simple as a real meal. When the smoke cleared, dozens were dragged away in shackles. But the damage was done. The riot wasn't just about bad food anymore. It was about dignity, survival, and the system's complete disregard for human life. And as prisoners were marched back to their cells, one question echoed through every block. If the food could kill them, what else was the prison hiding? The warden doubled down. After the riot, security tightened like a noose. Extra guards patrolled the tiers. Mail was censored, visits reduced, and every inmate who took part in the protest was thrown into solitary. The official message was clear: resist, and you'll be crushed. But something had already changed inside those walls. The inmates weren't afraid anymore. They were angry. Kitchen workers risked punishment by slipping notes out in meal trays, exposing what they'd seen. Spoiled meat stamped with expiration dates from years earlier. Boxes labeled not for human consumption, stacked in the pantry, rats gnawing through rice bags. Proof that the disturbing truth about prison meals was worse than anyone imagined. Word leaked to the outside. Families of inmates began calling news stations, demanding answers. Advocacy groups picked up the story. Headlines screamed about rotten food behind bars and inmates fed trash meals. The prison couldn't hide it anymore. But inside, the damage was already done. Men had gotten sick. Some had collapsed. And Darnell's death still haunted every cell. The final straw came on a sweltering summer day. Trays arrived late, carrying nothing but the same old loaf. In one tier, prisoners pushed the trays back out without touching them. In another, they flushed the food straight down the toilets. The message was simple: we will starve before we eat your poison. The standoff didn't last long. Guards stormed the tiers, swinging batons and dragging men from their cells. But this time, the fight wasn't physical. It was spiritual. By refusing the meals, inmates turned the very system of control upside down. In the weeks that followed, investigations began. Lawsuits were filed. Contracts with food vendors were questioned. Officials promised reforms, though many inmates doubted anything would truly change. Still, the truth had been exposed. The disturbing truth about prison meals wasn't just about bad food. It was about punishment disguised as nourishment, profit placed above human life, and a system that believed dignity could be stripped away with something as simple as a tray of slop. And as the cell doors clanged shut each night, one question remained. If food, a basic human need, could be corrupted like this, what else was happening behind bars that the world had yet to see?